Well, hello, everyone, and happy Saturday afternoon. I hope everybody is having a great Saturday and a great weekend so far, and I hope I had a productive week as well. My name is Don Terrell, and I want to welcome you to another great episode of The Color of Motion, where I like to say stories come in all shades. Where I highlight people of color and diverse backgrounds in the industry of motion graphics, animation, visual effects, cartoons, and comics, which, by the way, is today's show about cartoons and comics, and which I love so much. You know the drill. Say hello where you're checking in from. While I make sure and do a little housekeeping, even though StreamYard says I'm broadcasting, I always kind of like to check to make sure that it is. So, again, I hope everybody is having a great week so far. Super excited about today's show. Been looking forward to this show for a while. I always enjoy uh, really talking cartoons and comics specifically today, because that's what our guest is all about. But always enjoy it as well. You know, we're here every Saturday afternoon, 3 p.m. Central Standard Time. You can check me out on all my, well, not all, but these channels right here, my LinkedIn page, YouTube, and Facebook pages where you can check out the show live. If you do happen to be checking in from Facebook, you may need to give StreamYard permission to pull your avatar if you want to engage in the conversation or throw a comment up. Go to StreamYard.com/Facebook and you can give StreamYard permission to pull your information. Again, make sure you say hello where you're tuning in from. Always like to give a shout out to everyone. Again, like I said, you can check me out on these channels, but I do highly encourage, if you are checking me out on LinkedIn and Facebook, I always like to encourage people to go and subscribe to my YouTube channel where you can check out all the other past great episodes and all the other content that's going up. You can go to youtube.com/Don Terrell. You can find me there. You can find all the great content that I plan on putting up. Again, I always like to give an update, but man, I'm getting super close to finally unveiling the new update of the show. I think I'm about a week out, maybe a week out. I always like to say two, just to give myself a little buffer there, because I still got a little bit of testing to do. But super excited to unveil the updated show. New graphics, new intro, new system. Spent the last few days getting the studio cleaned up and in good shape. So really looking forward to it. Like I said, I think I am rolling on all my platforms here, so we should be ready to rock and roll. Let me make sure. So that's why I'm so excited about jumping on the new system, because it makes everything so much better, and it's just strictly, as you can see, it's strictly going to be dedicated to the live stream show. So I'm not really doing anything other than the show on that system. So it's not going to be weighted down like my system here is with all my other apps and stuff. Miss Salve, I appreciate you tuning in. Miss Salve Black, awesome guest. Looking forward to having her back on the show very soon for sure. All right. Looks like we are good to go. So with that, I'm going to call it and get ready to rock and roll here. All right. Like I said, I have been really excited about doing this episode because, as all you know, I love cartoons and comics, and just everything about it. So this has been a particularly uh, great episode I've been looking forward to, because my next guest and friend is deep in it, and he's doing some awesome work, as you're going to see. And I don't know if you saw the video that I shared with his pertaining to his Kickstarter, but awesome work. And with that, my next guest is a Haitian-American writer and publisher, and was born in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, and grew up in Brooklyn, New York. When he is not writing computer code, he's writing stories for graphic novels and comic books under his publishing company, Dream Fury Comics. He read comics when he was growing up in Brooklyn, and at the age of 11, he fell in love with the medium and started drawing his own comics and sold them to classmates. And at the same time, his love for computer programming grew, and he headed down that career path since it seemed like a more practical profession. We always tend to go with practicality. I don't know why. But his love of writing and creating didn't diminish, thank God. A couple of decades later, he decided to pick up where he left off as an 11-year-old child. He wanted to create comic books again. And in March of 2017, he teamed up with artist Giancarlo Bernal to create the Crescent City Monsters webcomic. As a fan base, he grew, and as his fan base grew, he launched his first Kickstarter campaign in 2018. The campaign surpassed its goal. Since then, it's been an incredible ride up. And he is the winner of the 2020 Glyph Comic Book Writer Award. He currently resides in the Bronx with his wife, 2 daughters, and their chocolate lab. Also works full-time as a senior consultant for an IT consulting firm. Everybody, please help me welcome my guest and my friend, Mr. Newton Lilavois. Mr. Newton, how are you?
Hey, Don. Thanks for having me.
So excited to have you on. Like I said, I have a particular passion for cartoons and comics. So, like I said, I was looking forward to really sitting and talking with you about what you're doing. And just to, I guess, kind of kick it off there, you kind of did in your bio talked a little bit about, you're starting young, but how were you? I mean, well, first off, how old were you when you came to New York? I mean, you were born in Port-au-Prince, but at what age did you come to New York?
I was 5 years old when I came to New York.
Okay, so
and then straight to Brooklyn and lived there until I was, I guess, 19 or 20. Yeah. Okay. Then I hopped around the different boroughs in New York City. I lived in Queens for a couple of years, and then uptown Harlem and Manhattan, and now I'm in the boogie down Bronx. So.
Yeah, boogie down Bronx. I would say that's on my bucket list. I've never been to New York, but I've always wanted to visit.
Yeah, it's a great place, especially in the summertime.
Okay. Well, I'm going to take your word for it. It seems a little crowded for me, but
yeah, it is.
Well, tell me since you spent a little time in Haiti, what were you like growing up as a child? I mean, or as a young child, how were you? Were you constantly drawing, or were you doing other things, or?
You mean, so you just mentioned Haiti. You mean when I was in Haiti, or just childhood in general?
Just childhood in general.
I was a regular kid, just a boy who would always have a lot of energy, getting into trouble, playing with my friends. I didn't get into comics. Like, I liked comics, and I remember reading comics once in a while from, the ages of, like, I guess 7 and 8 and 9, but I didn't really get into comics until I was about 10 or 11, fifth or sixth grade. There were a couple of people in my class who were into comics and they were collecting it, and so I started collecting and getting into comics too. One friend in particular, I still remember, his name was Curtis. He was a comic collector, and like when I first used to read comics, right, I used to do one of these, like, like, and he's like, oh, hold up, you gotta hold a comic like this. So he's like, gotta hold it like this, and flip the pages like this,
The art to it.
Yeah, there was an art to it because he wanted to preserve the value and not mess up like the spine and whatnot. So he he kind of schooled me on like proper comic etiquette. So
it's funny because nowadays, like I said, I guess collectors get, well, I guess if you're collecting now, you buy two of them. One of them, if you're gonna, I guess, play with it or read it or whatever, and the other one you can leave in the package and stuff like that. So
yeah. I wasn't a collector per se. I was more of a comic reader, like, because you could, I guess, distinguish them, but most of the times they're one and the same. But collectors really, their main focus of comic books is finding those collections or comic books that they think would be valuable in the future.
Yeah, really rare edition comics for sure.
Yeah.
Do you have any particular one that you liked, or any particular comic
book series?
Yeah, comic book series that was a favorite of yours?
I didn't have a favorite. I know when I listened to a lot of people and they were younger, they always mentioned like one or two comic book series that really grabbed them into comics, but I loved it all. I was a big Marvel person, so everything, anything Marvel, I just read, I loved. It was like, I just couldn't get enough of it. So anything from the X-Men to Fantastic Four, the Avengers, Iron Man, Thor, Wolverine, all of it. I mean, Silver Surfer, Ghost Rider.
They got a lot of them, which I guess is why they're not going to run out of movies.
Yeah, I was so into it that Marvel had these books called Marvel Universe. I don't think they have them now, but it was basically like a profile of every super villain. It wasn't even, I shouldn't say super villain or superhero. It was a profile on every Marvel characters, because there were characters in there that didn't even have powers. I think, like, for example, they had an entry for Ben Grimm's girlfriend, Alicia.
Oh yeah.
I forgot her name. The blind girl, and she was even in the book. So it was like, even people without powers was in it, but just Marvel characters in general. And I used to read the Marvel Universe profiles. And the great thing about when I was growing up is that, collecting comic books wasn't really seen. Then it wasn't like a nerdy thing. It was like a cool thing, especially if you could draw. Like, there were classmates that I had that were, doing some really incredible stuff. One kid, he was so good at that time, at his age, he was drawing almost just as good as a regular professional comic book writer. And I remember one kid, he had one of those black and white composition books, and he drew out like just different superheroes. And I remember that inspired me, because like we'd flip through his pages, his black and white composition book, and like he'd have each page would feature a superhero that he had created in his head. And so, and at that time when I started, when I saw that, I was like, oh, this is great. And that's when my inclination for storytelling sort of happened. So I was like, I want to create my own comic book. So I would draw my comic books, and there were other kids who were interested in it. So it wasn't like just me, myself.
Yeah.
I had partnered with this other kid. I remember his name was Cedric. What's up, Cedric Richardson? so we had partnered together to start a comic book, to start writing and drawing comic books, and I remember we had the creative differences, so we a little argument. Can you imagine, like, 11-year-old kids like
Yeah,
having creative differences?
going back at it, back and forth.
Yeah, yeah, going back and forth. So like, you know what? I'm gonna start my own comic company, and so then it became like a Marvel DC kind of thing. It's just kind of funny.
Oh man, that's
But
hilarious.
so yeah, and it was interesting because it wasn't like, oh, there's those nerdy kids doing comic books. Like, to be a nerd in the schools and environment that I grew up, it was more like you had to be considered like smart and into stuff that people weren't really into. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you were into like cartoons and whatnot, that was like regular stuff. If you were watching that wasn't considered nerdy stuff. It was what everybody did. As you can tell, because Wu-Tang, they were into comic books and they were into all that kung fu stuff. So
Yeah.
growing up, that wasn't like a nerdy thing. That was a cool thing. You were all right. That was a safe space. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So
But it was my other hobby, computer programming, that
I was
put me
just
into that
getting ready
nerdy
to ask.
cat.
Yeah, I was just getting ready to ask you about that. So you were kind of balancing the comics and the computers at that time, huh?
Yeah. My dad had bought a computer. It was an old school computer too. Like, the computers that we have now seem like science fiction compared to the computer I had.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was an Atari. It was an Atari 1200 XL, and back then, or most computers didn't come with monitors. You can attach it to a TV, so it was attached to a TV. And then it didn't have a hard drive. It had like this little cartridge, and you put it inside. And if you wanted to save information, it didn't even have a disk drive at that time. It had a tape drive. So you save your information on this big old tape drive kind of thing. And if you wanted to find a program, you had to have to exactly knew where the program was and fast forward. And you know how they had the counters on the tape drive, and
Yeah.
oh, there it is,
Oh man.
137. But yeah, that it was really it was a real old computer. At that time, it wasn't old. Of course, it was cutting edge,
Yeah. That was kind
cutting
of
edge.
back then.
But yeah, and he was like, "You guys don't use the computer. You should use the computer." So I was like, I took a look at it. I was like, "All right, let's see what's up." And then I flipped through the book, and it was like a programming book, and it showed you how to make programs. I was like, "Oh, this is kind of interesting." So I was like, typing and looking at the book, and I started, following the exercises. Then when I understood it, I started creating my own little programs, and I was like, "Oh, this is kind of dope. I like programming, And so I would just program like all day, like just like, and so I started teaching myself programming. And then, when I got later in school, I would take computer courses and strengthen my programming experience that way.
Yeah. So and I was going to ask you this a little later on, but I guess I'll ask you now. You started off you started off drawing your own comics and things like that when you started, but now you're working with an artist. Did you feel like you had to, or you drifted towards writing as you started going deeper into comics, or did you feel like that was a choice you had to make when you started Dream Fury? I gotta either decide to write or you didn't want to do both, or what?
So when I was drawing my own comics, I was young at that time, and I was like, yeah, my drawings are dope. I thought, and I had above average drawing skills, and it was okay. And it happened so that my brothers, who were artists too, and they could draw. And as time was going along, they would draw comic book characters and comics too. And as time went on, I realized, like, man, my drawing skills really hasn't improved. And meanwhile, my brothers were banging it out. They like every year they were like getting better. And that's when I realized, like, yo, I'm okay to draw, but that's really not my thing. It's like so like early on, I knew that I wasn't my drawing skills wasn't like my thing,
Yeah.
and watching my brothers and their passion for drawing and art, I realized like even though I liked it, I wasn't on that same level in terms of passion. So I was like, okay, if you want to become an artist, or if you want to get into art like that, I would have to be with their passion and at their level. And I realized like, yeah, that wasn't for me. So early on, I knew that I wasn't gonna become a comic book artist or artist per se. So that was decided real early. So by the time I started Crescent City Monsters, I definitely knew I was going to be a writer of the series, a creator slash writer of the series. So yeah, that was determined real early.
So when did you kind of start really getting serious about the writing as you were getting older and moving along? When did you say, okay, I think I'm good at writing, and I'm doing a lot more writing. I got a lot more stories. At what point did you really start to, okay, this is what I really kind of enjoy doing?
I think it started off slowly because let's see, because I've been asked this question, and so as I've been asked the question, I'm always thinking about the answer, and there's like how your memory kind of like gives you new things, like, oh, do you remember this? And I'm like, oh yeah, and that kind of fits into the whole the history of things. But sometimes when you're first asked the question, you might not realize like how certain pieces fit in. So I'm gonna kind of put up the puzzle together as I'm speaking. So one of the things I realized, like, or remembered, was like when I was younger, is I was like in fifth grade and we had to write a story. And I wrote this story, and the story was like this really fairy tale story, and it was it was something different. It was unique, and when I looked at it, I recognized it as something that it was my own story, and it was unique, and it was kind of something fresh. I don't remember exactly what the story was, but it had like a fairy tale element to it. And the teacher was like, "Oh, this is a really great story," and da da da. So I think that when I think back on it, I think that was like the first thing that kind of just sparked the idea of just being a storyteller. And then when I hit junior high school, I had a teacher, and he did this great thing. So instead of like regular classes, he said, "Okay, every day, I'm gonna make English class a little more interesting. You have these journals, and you every day you should write in the journals. That's your homework. For the first half of this class or the semester, we're not gonna do regular classes where I sit and teach you grammar. We're gonna read out loud some the volunteers of these journal entries."
Oh,
So, and that was great because every day, you would write like something in your journal, and then you would uh you would volunteer to read it in class if you wanted to. And I was absorbing so many great stories and journal entries, and it was real. A lot of it was real life experiences of your fellow classmates, and some of it was really deep, personal. And so you're listening to it and you're absorbing all of this, and it kind of helped me as a writer. And sometimes my journal entries would be like stories. So I would read the stories, and the class would really like them. And one story in particular, and I still am a like introvert. I mean, at that time, I was like very shy, and I didn't want to read this one story. But one of my classmates saw my journal entry. He's like, "Yo, this is cool. You gotta read this." And I was like, "Nah, nah, I don't want to read it." And he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna read."
oh, he fell out there for a second. We're having a little technical difficulty there. I'm sure he'll be right back on, Mr. Newton. But as you can see, like I said, doing some great work. I'm going to throw up some of his work while he's gone, and hopefully, like I said, he'll be back on. Of course, as you know, the nature of live streaming, anything can happen, and you just gotta roll with it. Of course, like I said, I came across his work and just was, the whole story of it. Like I said, he's working with a very talented artist. But the artwork and story was very intriguing to me, and the fact that he was incorporating Black characters just kind of stood out. And I think kind of like, and I was gonna, talk to him about it once he gets back on, but I think it's very interesting that, you don't see a lot of, which is, I guess, why Jordan Peele kind of rose quickly there, because the juxtaposition of Black characters in horror you don't typically see. So that's what kind of struck me when I saw it. It's like, oh, he's kind of pairing Black characters in this kind of horror monster, setting, which, like I said, you don't typically see. So Mr. Newton is back on. We are going to jump back on with him for sure. Hold on, let me back step here. Let me back step here. He is back on. There he is.
Hey Don, sorry about that.
No worries. I was just explaining. I have to. I got used to. You got to roll with it when you're live streaming. And I've definitely had that happen to me where I've my power, that happened to me one time. I was doing a live stream and the power went out in my house. So it happens.
It was strange. When I started, it said I had 4 hours battery life, so I was like, all right, cool. But they lied to me. My computer just said, whoop.
You didn't have quite as much juice. But no, you were saying that, one of the students in your classmates was had a dope story. Just, you're kind of an introvert type of person.
Yeah, he was like, he read the story, the journal entry, and was like, oh man, this is a dope story, you should read it. And I was like, nah, I don't want to read it. He's like, nah, go ahead. He's like, all right, I'll read it for you. And so he read the story, and once again, because I have a bad memory, I don't remember what the story was about, but it was a horror story. And the class, my classmates loved it, and my teacher was like, oh, this is great. And then it was like, as time went on, I was like, I really like writing stories. So I went in high school, I had creative writing courses, and I took those. I even entered a couple of contests and won for story writing. And I placed either first, second, or third.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt like I had a knack for it. And I was always coming up with ideas, and and at that time I was with my brothers, and we would always like spit ideas to each other, be like, yeah, what about this idea where this person does this and this, and I'd be like, oh, that's cool. What if you do this in the story? And so my brothers and I would always talk about ideas. So that was always something in the background. So going into college, and then even after college, my brothers and I would always talk to each other and be like, yo, I just came up with this idea. What do you think about this? And so, that was always something since childhood, like having some kind of an idea for a story and then, kind of fleshing it out. But, I never really came to the point where I wrote out the ideas and actually wrote out the whole story. In fact, when I was younger and I was creating my own comics, I had this bad habit of I'd only do issue once, because I'd do a first issue, like, oh, that was great. And then, when I tried the second issue, I'd get distracted by another idea that I'd want to do and do an issue one for that. So when I was younger, I never actually had an issue two or created an issue two of any story that I created. So it's a good feeling that as an adult that I'm able to push that first issue, first issue problem.
Completed issue. So you
Yeah.
think, so obviously you went into computer programming as a profession. You didn't think about, as you were realizing, hey, you kind of got a knack for it, maybe going to further education in creative writing or
Yeah, it's funny because I asked myself the other day if I was a computer programmer, what would I be doing? And I think I would be a writer. The only thing about at that time, my perception of being a writer was first when I was taking the English class in school, I was horrible at grammar. I hated taking English class, so it was like,
Yeah.
and I was like, and I was like the type person I like to kind of like freestyle things and structure isn't really my thing. Anytime somebody's trying to put structure to something, I'm like, oh, I was like, here we go. Yeah. I was like more of like a freestyle, feel it out kind of person. Like, okay, this is where I'm gonna go. This is, I think I have a feel for this. This is what I'm gonna do with it. So, and then I looked at writing as a profession, and I thought it was an interesting idea, but for some reason, it just like there was no pathway I could see that to me was satisfying enough, or for me to be like, all right, I, this is the path I should take, and these are the sacrifices I'm willing to take, right? Because I understand, like, for example, uh, as a writer, you can start off as a writer for a magazine or a newspaper,
Yeah.
or even writing instruction manuals, right? And then you write what you really want on the side. For me, I couldn't picture myself doing things like that. And then the idea of just straight out writing, like being a writer itself, I understood that at the time, like if I wanted to do that, that would mean that I'd probably have to have a job on the side, and it just to me, and I wouldn't be living the most comfortable life. 'Cause, so I was like, I just at that time I couldn't picture that as something viable, that I would be totally happy doing. So that's why I feel like I never really pursued the idea. But I
So
would have.
the thought of even the fact that you knew you liked comics and you never put the two that okay, they got to have writers for the comics, that was a pathway for you, or
Oh, even like a comic writer, that would have been even more of a, I don't know, kind of thing. It's like, because I at the time I was thinking of writer just in general.
yeah.
Like I just wanted to write stories. And then if you asked me at the time, hey, what about a comic book writer? And I knew that was an option, that there was something that you could do, but in the back of my mind, I would have realized that if I did the calculation, that it's not something that I probably could make a really good living doing, and so, and because I had that fallback as computer programming, I knew this, you make a lot more money as a computer programmer just starting off, than you do as a writer. So, you know, um,
Well, I mean,
that
would you advise somebody to go, because like I said, I've talked to a lot of artists or animators or other content creators that have come from a different path. Some have been in architecture or this and that, as opposed to just starting out doing, I guess what they love doing. Would you advise that now, as far as taking a safe path or the more, like you said, practical path of, well, this makes me money, but I'm happy doing this?
Yeah, I mean, so don't get me wrong. I definitely think that what I was explaining was my viewpoint at that time earlier in my life. like how I view things and how I calculated the situation. But I have two daughters. One of them is starting to apply for colleges, and my advice to her is, hey, go with what you love. When I was growing up, my parents are old school Haitians.
Yeah.
You had to either be a doctor, lawyer,
Mm,
or an engineer. That's how a lot of immigrant parents are anyway.
yeah.
But yeah, so and with Haitians, it's the same way. So that kind of growing up in that kind of practical household, that's something that was in your mind as you were growing up. You know, um, I did believe that, hey, it was possible to do what you love, and not be too concerned about like, hey, I'm making the money. Da, da, da. So currently, like I said, with my daughters, when I give them advice, I always tell them, hey, look, go with what you're passionate about, and then once you find that, make sure that you go in hard, like with whatever you're interested in. I mean, hard, like day
Always.
and night. That's your thing. You breathe, you sleep, you think. So if you do that, don't the money will come in. And I was explaining to my daughters, I was like, my parents, they weren't born here. They didn't live in America. They don't at a young age, they don't really see how in America it's possible that if you, even if like a career like as an artist, if you really going hard, mind your business. And when I say mind your business, I mean understand the business side of what you're doing.
Yeah.
If you mind your business, you and going hard, make your connections, you will succeed. So it's different than in other countries like Haiti, where there might be less opportunities for an artist to actually make a lot of money.
Yeah.
It's difficult there for them to do that. So that's why my parents were like that. But in here in America, it's a little different. You can have the opportunity. That's not to say that every artist is rolling and making bank.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
that's not the case for sure. But the opportunity is there to actually make a living. I'm not to say even if you don't end up rich, you can actually make a living where you can support your family and yourself and whatnot. But like I said, you have to grind hard. You have to make sure that you're in it to win it. That this is that you don't play around, and you
Yeah.
make sure you mind your business.
Yeah, and I think that's, I mean, and even American, I think, based parents, we're still kind of in that, because I've talked to, again, like I said, just talking with some, and even my mother, like I said, even though, she wasn't discouraging of it, or, didn't, try and sway me, she always kind of, through that, you ought to have a backup or something like that. So you did tell, I think most of the older generation tend to think more security, or like your parents, something secure that was going to make them money that they can get into, get insurance and the benefits and all of that kind of stuff, thinking that you know they knew their child, may have known their child was talented, but couldn't possibly imagine, like my mom, she couldn't quite get how I could make a living doing cartoons and comics. Even though she knew I was, liked it and was kind of good at it, it's like, okay, well, I support you, in what you want to do, but I'm not sure exactly how you're gonna, or where you're gonna take it. I think that's just it might be a generational thing, you know.
Yeah, and I think too, what changed my perspective is just seeing, like, after working for a while and seeing how things work out. I've seen people who started off as one thing, but they end up doing another thing. Um, and everything's a transition, right? So I realize, like, whatever my daughters are gonna do now, they may change, right? The most important thing is like how you start, right? So if one of my daughters wants to be an actress, right? So I'm telling her, all right, you know, watch movies, look at certain things, and really be into it. And I know she's really smart and motivated, so I'm comfortable with telling her, yeah, you know, if you want to go to college and go into acting, that's great. You just, like I said, just make sure you go in hard and study your craft, right?
Yeah.
And I know in the back of my mind, even if like she doesn't even become an actress, whatever skills and experience that she develops as an actress will help her be whatever she wants to in later in life. You
Yeah.
know, so I in that respect, I don't. That's why I don't worry about it too much because, like I said, I've seen in the workplace where like I'm a computer programmer. I know people who are like, oh, I used to be a musician. You know, it's like it's crazy. So it's like I understand that what's really important is that you understand how to become whatever you become and be good at it, and then keep taking that pattern and applying it to everything else that you want to do or anything else that you want to create.
Yeah.
That's the most important thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, not living with the regret that you didn't try whatever it was that you wanted to at least try. And like you said, give it your all. And at least you could say, I tried it. I found out I might, wasn't as good as I wanted to, or it wasn't something that necessarily I thought I would want to get into, but I gave it a shot and tried it. Um, so when was it that you decided to create Dream Theory comics?
Uh, technically, since I was 11,
Oh, okay. Well, when did it become official that you created?
no, I mean, officially it was, I guess, December of 2013. I was so before then, I was actually interested in doing a web series, right?
Mhm.
Because at that a few years before I started uh, Dream Theory Comics, I was really into doing like videos, right? So I used to live in Harlem, and so I wanted to create a vlog, right? And one of the ideas I had was like, all right, I'm going to create this video blog about Harlem, and because I loved when I lived in Harlem, I loved the people and the places. So
Yeah.
I was like, I'm gonna do a video blog on Harlem, and at that time it was becoming very gentrified. So a lot of things was happening. It was exciting. It was hot. Everybody was talking about the new Harlem. So I created this video blog, and I was I was going around shooting, videos of people and places, and it was cool. I learned, a few things about the video, of recording video, live, not live, but uh, on premise, which is
Yeah.
different than writing out a story or video, and then taping people, and then editing things and putting things together. That itself was kind of an art form there too, because you take all this footage from this event, and then you come back and you have like so much footage, and you're like, okay, how do I chop this up and create a story out of this?
Yeah.
And you realize like, oh, I don't have to do things in sequential order. I could flip it, and then you find common themes and clip everything. And that itself, I was like, okay, you know, um, editing and just it was kind of like an interesting process. And so as I was doing that, and I was uploading my videos to YouTube, I recognized that YouTube was a really powerful thing. And at that time, everybody knew the potential of YouTube. But when I was looking at it, I was like, man, YouTube is basically they're providing you the the opportunity to create your own network, right?
Oh
Because
yeah.
you can create like all these web series and all these ideas, put it on YouTube, and you have uh you have the platform to do it. And and I was like, man, that's really powerful. And so I was like, okay, so what I want to do now is I want to create original content. So I started I started trying to write a web series. I came up with this idea. I told my brother, I was like, hey, I want to write this web series, but I don't really have a lot of money to be putting into all this stuff. And he gave me this great idea of like a story. He's like, well, why don't you do a story that does this. I was like, oh, that's dope. That won't cost a lot of money. And so I was like, so I started writing the script for it, and then that's when I was like, man, I really like storytelling. That's when the writing started coming in, and I was like, I really love just creating stuff. Whether it was like, because at that point I was already creating videos, and I like that and the video editing aspects of it. But like the common theme was, you at the end you still have the story to tell. And so now I was like, all right, going from places to places and videotaping is cool, but I want to create my own story now. So I started writing out the script. But at that time, things it was really hectic at my life. Like family life was really, my daughters were younger, and family life was like still like I couldn't be away from home too long, and that kind of project would kind of like, my wife was like, it's like, you gotta be home more often. I was like, so I was like, all right, let me put this video thing to the side for now, and then I'll wait for the right time when I could do it. And in the back of my mind, I'm still like, trust me, like I'm still gonna do a web series, man. It's gonna watch out for that. But anyway, so I stopped that for a while. I put that on hold, but I'm the type person that if I really, I'm a creative type person, and I really want to do stuff. Like I can't just sit down and just like, if I have an idea, just, and
Yeah.
I'm really feeling it. It's hard for me to just sit on it and just
Hold
not
it.
do anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, hold it, not do anything about it. So I was I saw I was a big Kickstarter person, and but being into tech and whatnot, I was only really looking at Kickstarter projects that were into tech. But then I saw this Kickstarter project that it was a comic book Kickstarter project. I was like, oh, that's interesting. I was like, Kickstarter to create your own comic. It's like, hmm. And so then, I pledged to the Kickstarter campaign, got my comic book, and I saw, from a user experience, I saw how Kickstarter worked, and I was like, and it blew my mind. I was like, yo, this is dope too. I was like, you're a regular person, you have a 9 to 5, and you have a project, but you want to create this thing, but money and your audience is always the thing, right? So I was like, but this platform allows you to raise money. And I was like, okay. So then I was like, and this was for a comic book, and I saw other creators, and they were pretty much in the same situation like me. They weren't, their regular job wasn't as a comic book writer or comic book creator.
Yeah.
This was something that they did on the side, and Kickstarter helped them grow an audience and get that money. So I was like, okay, I was like, this is a dope platform here. I was like, I gotta learn about this thing and how I'm gonna build an audience, because I want to now. I was like inspired. I was like, I want to create my own comic book story, because before, um the process of creating a comic, to me, I knew about it, but I didn't really go into it, because from what I knew, it was like from other people who I've seen that, like a friend of my brother's did it before, and it was really like, it felt like a um for lack of better words, like an underground process, right? Like
Mm.
you were this guy, and you drew, or you got somebody to draw, and you did your comic book, and you had to kind of like hustle and sell and thing, and it was seemed like a lot of work, like for I'm not sure what the returns were. So, but I was like, that seems like a lot of work. And but then when I saw the Kickstarter, I was like, it makes it a lot easier, because now instead of hustling so hard to get um you build your client base, and you have the internet. And I was like, I started in my mind. I started to see the potential of it. And usually when I see potentials of certain things, is like, okay, this is the direction to go. So I was like, I can write. So I was like, I'll write a comic book, and I love comic books. So I started uh, writing my story for my comic book, and then uh, from there, learned as much as about Kickstarter that I could, and from there, I was doing my research. There's certain ways you can approach a business, right? And they have different business models, right? And
Yeah.
one of the models that I saw was, oh, you can create a webcomic for free, have people read it, and people you build an audience that way. And then once you have a big enough audience, you can launch a Kickstarter. And at first, it didn't really resonate with me. It almost doesn't make sense, right? Because how could you build an audience if you're giving things away for free, right? Or how could you convince people to eventually buy what you were giving away for free, right? But the model was proven. I was reading a lot of stories and creators who were using this model, right? And so I said, that's the way I'm going to go, because they did it, so and it worked, so I'm gonna do it. I was like, for me, that seemed like the best approach to do, and so that's exactly what I did. Crescent City Monsters started off as a uh, a web series, and that's when I decided to create Dream Fury Comics, because at that time I had other ideas, and I said I'm gonna create. I'm gonna start with Crescent City Monsters, and then from there I'm gonna build on.
Yeah.
And so that's after I did my research and the best way to do that, the marketing and whatnot. Uh, that's the path I took, and it worked. And, it worked, and I was like, this is great. So built that audience as a web comic. My first Kickstarter, there were people who already knew about the web comic, and they were excited when the first issue was going to come out. So lo and behold, the idea that people still buy something that's available for free held true. People, people, because your real audience are people who actually want the physical product.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Well, I
I
mean, I think it's proven all the way, because you got even digital marketers. You can see digital marketers doing things for free, whether it's a podcast or whether it's giving away a ebook or giving away free content, because they know as people consume that content, the ones that are really into it will eventually buy them when they put out a program or when they put out something else. So it's the same process. You give away content, people consume your content and like your content. It's good, so that when you do have a product or a service or something that you're selling, they're going to naturally buy it because they like your content, plus you're giving them away something free. Everybody likes free stuff, and everybody likes to consume stuff free. That's just a primer to get them into, say, your funnel. If you're talking marketing terms, that's the marketing term. Get people into your funnel. You give away free content, and that just gets people used to your information. So I can see why it will work. And I like to say, nowadays it's such a great time for content creators, because it's not just Kickstarter. You got Patreon. You got so many other places that allow content creators to build and monetize their own work.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Patreon, like I said, is another one. I haven't really mastered Patreon. I have a Patreon page, but I know there's a lot more I could be doing, but because of time constraints, I have a regular job. It's a little harder, but yeah, Patreon is another great platform for that too.
Well, do you see yourself, like I said, you see the potential of what you're doing? Is at some point your goal is to step away from the IT job and do, Dream Theory publishing, just not only your content but other content as well?
Yeah, that's the ultimate goal. I'm not sure about other people's content because I have like 300 billion ideas in my head and I want to do first. So I definitely doing that is my ultimate transition. I would love to do that. I told my wife I have like a 5-year plan.
Okay.
I'm gonna be creative in 5 years. Like I'm not gonna be IT person.
So is
Because
horror your thing? I mean, do you like? I mean, is that kind of the genre that you tend to like, horror style?
I like all types of genre. I'm the type person who's generally just into good storytelling. If like right now, I'm also working on a collaborative story with another comic book creator, TJ Sterling, and we're working on a sci-fi. And it's going to be a genre that I haven't. Well, I've done something before, but I haven't released it. But this is going to be the first release sci-fi um, story I've done. So yeah, genre. I like all different types of genre. To me, it's all about the characters and the story.
Gotcha. So how did you come across Gian? Because he is a super talented artist. How did you two connect?
So it was, there were a couple of artists that I was trying out before I had met Gian. So, it's a process. Whenever you're starting a comic book, you're trying to find the right artist for the story that you're doing. And part of my process is going through Instagram, and what's the other website? ArtStation.
Yeah, I would say
And DeviantArt. So I would just keep going through DeviantArt, and it's a long process because it's like there's a lot of amazing artists there, but you still have to find that right particular artist. And so, like I mentioned before, I was into a lot of these different Kickstarters, and it happens that I ran into Gene's artwork on DeviantArt, I believe, and I recognized his artwork because I had bought a comic book that he had illustrated from a Kickstarter I had backed. So I was like, oh yeah, I know this guy. I was like, this is great. I was like, his artwork is really good. Let me reach out to him. He's already have experience in comic books, and he's done it with somebody who's done a Kickstarter. He understands, that there are, timelines and deadlines and files. So I was like, let me reach out to this guy. And lo and behold, he was available. So I was like, all right, cool. But I always ask artists to do like sketches of certain things. That's how I kind of get a feel of um, their style. Also, a feel of how they communicate. Because one of the important things is like you can find the dopest artist, but if they're not really good at communicating, when they miss deadlines and things like that, no matter how dope it is, how dope they are, sometimes it may not be worth working with them if they can't meet deadlines, or they don't, there's a lack of communication in terms of like, where they are. Like if you say, oh, okay, at the end of the week, I'm gonna finish 3 pages, but then 2 weeks later, you haven't sent me anything and haven't even emailed me why you haven't sent anything, is a bad look, So no matter how dope of an artist, because that, it's hard to believe, but that's why in comics sometimes you'll have an artist who ends up drawing a book, and that artist is not like really the dopest artist you've ever seen in comics, and you're like, how did this guy get a thing? It's because he was able to produce those pages, as quickly as they need. So that's one of the things I learned, that is as in the comic field, if you're an artist and even if you have decent skills, but you're able to bang out enough pages, then it's possible just for you to make a living. And I, and Gene, he fit the bill. He was great. His communication style was great. He loved. It turns out that he loved drawing monsters, which was right up the alley of what I needed. And his artwork turned out to be even better than what I had expected, because what I saw in DeviantArt was good. It was really good. Obviously, that's why I reached out to him. But then when he sent me the first page of Crescent City Monsters, I knew, I was like, I was blown away. I was like, man, yo, this is this is gonna be something different right here.
So you let him basically, you kind of, was it a collaborative thing that you kind of, this is kind of what I'm thinking of when you send them the words, or are you just letting him as an artist kind of interpret your story?
So Jin, he interprets the story. It's hard. It's a little hard to explain. Like so it's collaborative in the sense. So Gene likes references, right? like, as much references as you could send him, right? Because he doesn't want to get bogged down in trying to figure out exactly what I want. You know what I mean? Like, and me going, no, 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 no. You know what? Let's do this. So so I send him a lot of references, and then obviously I send him the script, and in the script I I I structure how the pages are gonna look, but that's mostly as like a reference of to. But so he'll come and he'll show me like a sketch of what he does, and I don't even look at the script anymore, like to verify like, okay, this is the panel and thing. I just look at what he does now, and I see like, okay, yep, this is what this page is supposed to do. I don't check my script to see, oh, Gene, you only did like four you only did four panels in this when I wanted five. I'll like, or actually he doesn't do that, but I don't do things like, oh, I wanted this to be a vertical thing and you
Yeah,
made this horizontal. I don't check that thing. I just look at the page and look at the artwork and see that if that page described is exactly what I want. And then the interesting why it's collaborative is because even though I'm giving him references and I'm writing what I want, his he puts things in the art that I didn't necessarily write.
right.
So it's his interpretation of what I was seeing in my mind,
Yeah,
and what I see is like here, like, and but he's such a great artist that he brings it up to here. His artwork is very cinematic. The angles he uses is amazing.
yeah, yeah,
And his panel layout, like he's such a comic book artist. Like you can, so being a comic book artist is a very special skill because you have to take um, advantage of the medium in terms of panel structure and the way it's laid out. And there's so many things to take into consideration. He's such a genius when it comes to just panel layouts, and it's and the angles, and so it's not just his artwork alone that does
yeah,
it.
yeah.
It's a whole combination of things
No,
that you don't typically see in your average comic book.
no.
He's an amazing person. That's my partner in crime.
And I'm
Shout
gonna
out to G and Carlo Bernal. What's up?
throw up some of his work. And I'm curious, and everybody, you could see some of the amazing artwork that Jen has done for Crescent City Monsters. Like I said, that's what kind of drew me in there. What is it? I mean, is it a challenge or interesting? I won't say a challenge, but is it interesting for you to kind of pair Black characters in a horror setting? So like I said, you don't typically see that, and I think that's why, like I said, Jordan Peele kind of blew up when he did it, because he put Black characters in a genre that you just never typically kind of saw.
Yeah, for me, it's it's interesting. So for me, I'm Black, so it only goes that my characters
Well, I
are gonna mostly be Black. But and now I say that because there are other Black creators and they have non-Black characters, right? But so for me, but for me, it's a natural thing. Like, let's say I was a white writer and most of my characters are white. To me, that's kind of a natural thing, right? You go with what you're comfortable with or what right? So that's it seems like a natural thing, right? Like a white writer would write with write mostly white characters or all white characters.
yeah.
So I'm a Black writer, so it seems natural.
But you do
My
have,
characters would be, huh?
you do have, I mean, you do have white writers that are like, writing, Black characters.
Oh yeah, yeah, you do. I mean,
So
and some.
would it be difficult for you as a Black character, which I'm assuming you have white characters in your comics, and it's not just strictly, I don't know, all
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, it's not difficult, and that's not to say that like in my previous statement, it's not to say that I think that only, like black writers should write black characters and white writers should write white characters. I'm not saying that. I'm just, saying what usually is typically comfortable for a writer, right? You're comfortable with what you know.
Yeah.
So the thing is, as a black person, and you've been exposed to the white world, and so it's such a variety of mediums, whether it be books, TV, and stuff, that you're writing for a white character wouldn't be too difficult for
Yeah.
you, right? Because
Yeah.
you might not be white, but you've been exposed to
Close enough to know what's.
yeah, to know what's what, right? But and the other way around is not really true. So I think that as a white, I think white people in general, I don't think they're exposed to black people enough where they could catch a lot of different nuances, and uh, you know, that's I'm not saying that's anything of their fault. That's just the way it is. So there's certain nuances that you wouldn't be able to catch that but and that's not to say that all white writers are like that or non-black writers are like that, because like my favorite show, The Wire, is written by a white guy. I mean, and it's excellent. It's like, I mean, like that's my favorite one of my favorite TV series, if not the top one. And that was and it's I, I it's like the way he portrays black people is so real, and it's because you could tell that he understood, or he was exposed to enough black people and their world and understand the gray areas, and so that when that show is amazing. So you can have situations like that, um, but for the most part, there are certain things that nuances that you couldn't really pick up. Like, for example, the religious and cultural things that sometimes just people just might not totally understand,
Yeah.
or they can only from the outside they view it from this perspective, but when you're in it, it's totally different. It's not like what they think it is. You know what I mean? So unless they're in it, sometimes it's difficult. And that's with everything. Like I couldn't go in and start writing a story about Japanese that involve Japanese culture, and Japanese people like kind of like would say, oh wow, this guy did a great job, he understands the culture, unless I was there like physically,
Yeah.
or like I was immersed in it.
Yeah.
you know
Time
um
to really immerse yourself in the culture and
yeah.
the story you're trying to tell, for
Yeah,
sure.
no matter how much research I do, no matter how many Japanese movies I watch or Japanese friends I have, there, there's a point where it's like, my experiences are gonna limit me in terms of um, what I know. I would have to dig deep,
Yeah.
and that's not to say that I couldn't do it. It's just to say
Or
that I would have to dig deep into it,
yeah.
and I wouldn't
Or
have to
work
be.
with or work or partner with somebody that's in the culture that could say, hey,
Oh yeah,
this
yeah, definitely.
a different feel or a different.
Hmm. I mean, when I'm writing Crescent City Monsters, I want to shout out to my cultural consultants, um, Shawanda Marie. She's she was born and raised in Louisiana. I had reached out to her because even so even though I'm writing about black people in Louisiana, I'm from New York.
Yeah.
I'm not well versed in a lot of the Louisiana culture. So I reached out to Shawanda and was like, "Hey, I know you're a native New Orleans person. Let me pick your brain in terms of, does this sound right? Should they be doing this? And she'll school me in terms of like what's right.
Yeah.
And so I'm sensitive to things like that, and I try my best. You can't really. It's hard to please everyone.
Yeah.
And sometimes, this is still art, so sometimes you have to take some artistic
Never.
liberties,
Yeah.
and everything can't always be super accurate or represented to the fullest. But I try my best.
Yeah, I think it adds to it. I know another friend of mine. You may know him. He was my first guest, Joshua Leonard, and he has a comic series called Team Supreme, which is all about dis. I want to say disadvantage, and I don't want to say kids with disabilities, different disabilities, whether it's hearing or um, autism and different things like that. He said he really took a lot of effort on talking with experts and friends in the different areas as he was creating the comics, because like I said, you can just, you know, arbitrarily do something, but it's really not going to come off as authentic. Even though you're taking liberties here and there as an art form, you still want a base of authenticity in what you're representing. So I think that's definitely the way to go, for sure. Um, where do you? I mean, you've done this. Where do you kind of? I mean, is this a long series? One of these long series comic books, or I mean, are there characters spawning off into other their own series like Marvel and that type of thing? Or
Yeah, so I want to try to continue Crescent City Monsters as long as I can. And so, the good thing about the title is it's not named after the particular main character for this story arc, which is the character is Jonas, and he's the main focus, and he's going to be the main focus for a while. But the idea is that I'll be introducing some new characters and maybe some story arcs, and that might be the main point of Crescent City Monsters. So I want to kind of flip it that way, where the title isn't focused on just a particular character all the time. That maybe once in a while it's flipped to somebody else who's in the storyline. So maybe another character would go on for another 10 chapters, and then maybe we go back to the main character, then another 20 chapters we go into somebody else, and just kind of flip it that way. So it's just like a whole storyline. But if I come up with a character I think that should definitely get their own series or have a spin-off,
yeah,
then I'll definitely do that. And there's one character that might be coming from the Crescent City Monsters world, and I think you had a graphic of her, Keisha, Demon
oh
Eater.
yeah. Let me
Yeah,
put this back up. Which was, like I said, one of those. This one right here.
yeah,
Yeah,
the one
that
on the right.
was really, like I said, intriguing. I really like the artwork and everything. So yeah, that looks like it would be an interesting. Uh,
Yeah, the response for that has been incredible because originally I was like, I had, as usual, I had some ideas, and I was like, I was reading I don't want to give too much away, I
yeah,
guess, for Keisha, but um, I was reading, I was looking up for African demons, right? And so, on Wikipedia clicking around, like, oh, that's interesting. That's interesting too. Then I read this one uh, entry about an African demon. I was like, word. I was like, damn, this is kind of interesting. What if he had a daughter? I was like, and so that's how that came about, and I was like, and it just like it it just
yeah,
started capturing my imagination, and it was a story that started taking a life of its own. Because usually when I come up with an idea, it takes a while to kind of gestate, kind of
yeah,
build, and like in my mind, it's not like I'm like, oh, I got this great idea, and then I start writing, and all the details come together. No, it takes some time sometimes
yeah,
to plot. Like like I'll have a general idea. It's like, okay, the story is about this, and it'll end like this. But I was like, I need the details, So for with her, as I was writing it, I was like, I was like, man, I was just like, the outline came real easy. I was like, okay, this is gonna happen. And then, so look out for that. That's a story that I'm currently working on. But Gian messed me up because I had already written out an outline, and he's doing like an art book,
Uh,
and so he was sending me pages for the art book, and he sent me this one character, and I was like, oh, this character is so dope. He's got to be in Keisha. So I was like, I was like, but to include him in Keisha, I had to kind of like I have to kind of restructure the outline. Not much, but I was like, all right, I gotta restructure the first chapter, so I gotta kind of rewrite a little bit.
yeah,
But yeah, I'm excited about that because at first I was gonna make it a standalone, like something outside of the Crescent City Monsters world, but I decided, you know what, there is gonna be a connection, but it's gonna be like a loose connection that like okay, they're in the same world and there might be a couple of the same characters, but I'm not gonna like heavily rely on it. But so it's gonna be a spin-off, but it's gonna be good. It's gonna be interesting because I'm excited about the story. It's got so much potential. I love the feedback that I was getting from it, from that one picture that I had posted. People love it. They like I just wrote a little blurb about the story, and that little blurb in the picture, people they just seem to oh, I want it, and they're like, oh, I, let me know when it's coming out because I'm buying it.
yeah,
And
like,
that really surprised me because I'm always posting sometimes story ideas, and I'll get some likes and people like, oh, this is great, da, da, da. But this one was like people were just like it seemed like they were hungry for this. So I was like,
yeah.
okay,
'Cause like I
I'm
say, you
gonna
look at it and you just are thinking, man, what's the backstory behind this? And
yeah,
what is it? Where did she come from? And what's the whole deal with her? It is
yeah,
an intriguing opportunity for us. I can see a series of stories on her.
yeah. When I was describing the scene in Gene, I was like, okay, I want her out in the forest, and I want her in a school uniform, and then because I wanted things that like are kind of like contrasting, right? She's in a school uniform in the middle of the forest, right? Like,
Yeah,
what's that about? And then I wanted her to have like one of the most kind of innocent hairstyles that you could have, So,
Afro,
yeah, Afro puff, that's what that's
uh,
like a little black,
captured, like you said, spot on captured it. It's
yeah. And
just make
so,
you ask questions.
and I was like, okay, and then I'm gonna have her hold like a big demon hand in her arms and wiping, blood off her mouth. And I was like, and Jean was like, hey, should we? And I didn't even want to show like her teeth because I wanted her to look as normal as possible. Because
Yeah,
like my first inclination is okay, put teeth on her and all this blood and have her eyes glowing because she's a demon eater. But I was like, no, 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 no. You know what? Let's stick with this whole contrast thing. It would look more interesting if she looked as normal as
yeah,
possible. So
yeah.
no glowing eyes, no sharp teeth. It's like, how could a normal girl eat demons, right? Without,
And that's what
so
makes you wonder. It's like, okay, looks like she just got out of school.
yeah, yeah. So I was like, let's do that because that if people don't recognize it, but at least on the, subconscious level,
Nah,
it would.
awesome, awesome. I can't wait to see how that story unfolds for sure. Oh man.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I'm curious. Like I said, we've been everybody. This is if you jumped in, just joining in. Of course, we're going over well over an hour this time again. Uh, but it's been a great conversation. I did want to ask you one more last question there. If you could kind of step back in time a little and kind of talk to your younger self, what one thing would you kind of tell your younger self?
Hmm.
Not
Oh,
necessarily to alter any, which I guess anything you tell them would alter your fast, but just advice or something that you've learned along the way that you would wish you would have gotten at a younger age, or wish you would have been hammered home a little bit younger.
hammered home a little bit younger. Um, I'm trying to think like because I'm a big believer in like even some of the mistakes that you make, you learn from. So there's certain mistakes that I probably made that I wouldn't, go back and tell myself not to make it because they were kind of helpful. So what would I tell my younger self that I would maybe not advice, but more of like words of encouragement.
Hmm.
I would just not that I needed it, because I'm a mixed bag of one time at one moment I'm like super humble. I'm like, man, I can't believe I'm here. I'm just so happy that that this is these are the things and opportunities that I have. Thank
Yeah.
God. Next minute I'm like, of course. This is
Of course I should be
I
here
put in the
today.
work. It's like
Hey,
I go from being
you gotta have a mix of both. You gotta
yeah,
have
yeah,
humility,
yes.
and you gotta have some confidence.
So
Yeah,
I would just really just words of encouragement. Just um, keep doing what you're doing and always believe in yourself. Um, so I like everybody else and other creators. I have doubts, self doubts.
yeah,
Sometimes you question yourself, like, are you doing the right thing? And is this really see, you just have doubts.
yeah,
So and a lot of them. So, and the hardest thing to do is to keep pushing through those doubts because you know you you you'll have doubts, and there'll be a point where you're like where you keep doubting yourself because it's a cyclical thing, right? You're like it's always highs and lows,
yeah,
and the one thing I'm always afraid of is that I'll catch myself in a low and I won't be able to recover from it.
yeah,
For me, that's the worst part because like anytime I'm on low, I'm always like, all right, just ride out the low because the high is gonna be coming soon. Just push through. And I'm always afraid that maybe one time that I'm stuck in the low and I can't get out and I give up.
yeah.
So the one thing I would always tell myself, in my um, younger self is never give up. Just keep going.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one thing I would say.
That's a good piece of advice, and I definitely feel you there. We all go through our highs and lows, and as a creator, like I said, I went through a particularly long period of dark low there. And like you said, you don't want to get that's the worry. You get kind of stuck in it for a long time. And I got stuck in mine for a good long time. And it took me a
Mhm.
while to really come out of it, for sure. So great piece of advice that you just kind of know that at some point you're going to come out into the light for sure. Uh, like I said, this has been, and like I told you before, I didn't get to half the questions that I wanted to. I do try and, like I said, really, really respect people's time because I know you got a lot going on. You got family and everything like that. So I do really appreciate you taking the time to jump on, Newton. Like I said, I appreciate you so much for being a part of the Color of Motion family and sharing what you're working on. And look forward to having you back on once you flesh out the new story there, because I really am excited to see it unfold and see where that character goes. Because that character, like I said, more than all your other ones, when I saw your artwork, really did kind of stand out to me for, I guess, the same reason as it stood out to everybody else. It was just different, and it made you ask the question, "What the heck is going on with this character?" You know, and the story just looks amazing. for sure. And so I'm excited to see all the stuff coming out of Dream Fury Comics that you're going to be doing.
Yeah, thanks. Just keep following me at Dream Fury Comics, both on.
While I have him on here, make sure that you connect with Newton and check out his work. Follow, like he was just saying, follow him on Facebook at Dream Fury Comics. Make sure, like I said, you connect with him. He's also on Instagram, Dream Fury Comics, Instagram.com, Dream Fury Comics. You can check him out on Twitter, Dream Fury Comics. He got them all. And like I said, he's even on LinkedIn, which is where I was blessed and lucky enough to connect with him there as well. But make sure, and all of these information will be in the show notes on YouTube, which is why I highly encourage you to go subscribe to my YouTube channel. You check out all the links, all the show notes and everything, and get all the information. But you definitely want to make sure you follow Michael or Newton. That's the wrong one. That was the wrong one. I forgot to put that in there. Yeah. Sorry about that.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
Definitely want to make sure you follow Newton and check out his work. If you haven't seen, like I said, the video that I shared, doing some awesome stuff with the Kickstarter for it and a beautiful, beautiful collection box. Like I said, I was kind of blown away by it and definitely want to get that information on who did where you got the box done, because it is something I want to do for the Color of Motion.
Okay.
Again, I definitely plan on having you back on, Newton. Like I said, as you're putting out great content and going to be following you closely. If you could hang on for just one more second in the green room while I close out, so I can thank you, again, in the right way, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm definitely looking forward to being back on. If you give me the chance.
Definitely plan on definitely going to have you back on, because like you said, you're creating too many stories and doing too many great stuff for not to have you back on.
Yeah, plus my answers tend to be a little bit long-winded, so it makes the shows a little bit longer. So we don't always get to cover everything, right?
Trust me, like I said, your last week's was 2 hours. So,
oh wow, okay, yeah. So it's not just me. Okay.
It was a 2-hour doozy there, but I enjoy it. Like I said, because I can talk comics and cartoons and just the whole process, forever. But like I said, I do try and be respectful of my guest time and viewers. I know aren't gonna, stay around for 4 or 5 hours for sure. So I'll definitely, like I said, plan on having you back on again soon, Newton, and sharing more of your content. So like I said, if you could hang on while I close out the show, I would definitely appreciate it.
All right. Peace, y'all.
All right, everybody, let's give him a great round of applause and thank him for being on the show. I appreciate it so much. Yeah. Guys, it's been a great episode for sure. Like I said, I could sit and talk comics and cartoons for a long while. So I appreciate the time that he gave to come on and be on the show and to be a part of the Color of Motion family. I hope everybody, like I said, enjoyed the show. Please make sure you tune in to next week's show. It's going to be a good one. Mr. Jay Francis, VP Current Series and Diversity, which is going to be a good conversation with Disney television animation. So I'm looking forward to talking with him about how he got into his position and talking about diversity as a whole, because that's what we talk about. So looking forward to that. Please make sure, like I said, you tune in next week, same time, same channel, YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Saturday, 3 p.m. Central Standard Time. Can't wait to see you all on next week's show. Peace and have a great rest of the weekend and a great week. Cheers, everyone.